Hi everybody, it's Maha here, and I'm just coming on today because I want to share with you some information about my beautiful book Dance of the Womb that we now have available online as an ebook, as a download, and also still as a hard copy book. So this week I'm going to be doing 6 Dance of the Womb live readings for you all, so you get to see and hear my book instead of it just being a static photo online. And I'm very proud of my book, an award-winning book that was endorsed by Dr. Michel Odent and Sheila Kitzinger, Sarah Buckley, and it's a timeless, ancient book, and it's a world first book on belly dancing for pregnancy and for birthing. And I want to tell you the story about how I wrote my book and why I wrote my book, and a little bit about me, as some of you are new to my Instagram and to my Facebook. We're doing this both live on Instagram and Facebook, so it's a bit of a test if I get the technology right. And so a little bit of history. As many of you know, I'm of Middle Eastern origin, so I'm of Palestinian Lebanese origin, and Palestinian on my father's side, Lebanese on my mother's side. And when I was a 6-month-old baby, my father took me from my mum and my brother as well, he was 2.5, and brought us to Australia when I was 2 years of age. So from 6 months to 2, I was in the Middle East and travelling the world with my dad. And then when I was 2, came to Australia without my mother. And when I was 7 years of age, my father remarried, so my stepmom was Australian. So I was actually at boarding school when I was 4. So that was a huge thing now when I look back, to think that at 4 years of age I was in a boarding school. And I think about my own children, at 4 years of age being in a boarding school, that it's very hard to imagine what it would be like to put my children into boarding school at 4. I was actually at Ballarat Girls Grammar. I was the youngest boarder in 1966 at that boarding school, and I have vague memories of the boarding school, actually, of a couple of things that happened there. And one thing that I really remember well is that there was a young girl called Dot Taylor. She was 18, and she would look after me. And I remember walking to the lake with her where the swans were in Ballarat, and through the gardens with her, and it was that connection to the mother that I didn't have. And I always wonder whatever happened to Dot Taylor. So if you're listening, Dot, it's Maha here. You may not remember when I was 4 years of age, walking me around the lake from Ballarat Girls Grammar. But I remember how I felt both that abandonment from my own mother, but feeling the warmth and connection to Dot, who cared for me as a mother. And as I mentioned, being only 4 years of age, that's very, very young to be in a boarding school. So as I said, my dad when I got to 7 in 1969, seems so long ago now, my father remarried my stepmother, who was Australian, and my brother at that time was 9, and we all lived in Melbourne. And we actually lived in the Templestowe Doncaster area, and when it was all the orchards, if anyone remembers that time. But yeah, it was amazing to have a mother, my stepmother, and I always knew that she wasn't my real mother, she wasn't my blood mother, but it was still warming to know that I had a female figure in my life after not having had anyone for 7 years. So, it was a very hard time to go through as a child, and my father was very, very strict. He was quite abusive at times, and it was a very, very difficult. And also being a migrant in Australia, first wave migrant, and having brown skin and my name Maha, which I used to get teased at school, and it wasn't easy growing up in Australia in those days. So I'm talking about the 60s and the 70s in this country. And knowing that I was estranged from my Middle Eastern roots, knowing that although those roots and that land and that motherland, that mother tongue, that mother was far away, I still carried the impression of those roots within me. And when I was 9 or 10 years of age, I had to go and learn Arabic in Melbourne at a school, and I hated it, and my brother hated it as well. We wanted to be Aussie. We wanted to be white Aussie, of white origin, and it was very hard because there weren't many people of especially Middle Eastern background in Australia. And it was quite unusual because we were Palestinian as well. And what we heard about Palestinian people was, blowing up aeroplanes and hijacking aeroplanes, and, that we were terrorists and all of that. So I was very ashamed to be Palestinian because of what I heard in the news. But I knew of our cultural roots, of my father's story, of us having lost our beautiful Palestinian village in 1948, of where our family had lived for thousands of years as Palestinian people. So not only had I lost my mother on my Lebanese side, I'd also lost the connection to my Palestinian roots, and I knew my father was a refugee in 1948, and we lost everything. We ended up in refugee camps, or he ended up in refugee camps with his mother and father and his 9 brothers and sisters. So, it's a story of abandonment, disassociation, disconnection, not belonging is the story that I have, stepped into and grown up in. And, it's a very difficult place for a child to be in that emotional story, as well as the disconnection from where one comes from, and then being in Australia. And actually, I always connected to the Aboriginal people here. I always felt very Indigenous because the Palestinian people are actually are indigenous to the land of Palestine. So we come from a very much of a tribal arrangement, being Palestinian, and having all that taken away, all that history, all those roots. And as Palestinian people, we have no homeland. So it's very sad for me to think that I don't have anywhere to call my home as such, a land that I can go back to. That is very, very difficult. But the land is within my heart. It's within my blood, my veins. It pulses through my body. And I think a lot of people, the Palestinian people are very misrepresented in many, many ways. And I've always felt a very strong connection to those roots and to my Lebanese roots as well. And it's a very sad thing to have lost our homeland, a place that we have had for thousands of years, and having that taken away. So, being a refugee of the motherland, of the land of where I come from. And I often say, I wish I could sit in the circle of women from where I come from. And there is no circle there in the land anymore. So I've had to create that feeling of the circle of my Palestinian roots, of my sisterhood, and create that in the work that I do and in my book, Dance of the Womb. And so the way I wrote my book was through storytelling. So the story of my life is interwoven through the movements of the belly dancing. So I couldn't separate the belly dance for birth from the story of my life. They are interwoven and they are interweaved like a dance. So I wrote the book. The book is very lyrical. It's like a song and a dance for birthing, for women, for understanding where we come from, that we are the carriers of life. We are the thread that holds and binds all women who've come before us on a universal level. So that's the place I wanted to write my book, Dance of the Womb, from, and tell my story of my Palestinian roots, of my Lebanese roots. And, I've become a childbirth educator from that place of that timeless ancient roots. And there aren't many of us in the world of Palestinian or Lebanese origin that are traveling the world and teaching. So I'm very proud to carry those roots into my birthing work and into, all the work that I do and all the connections that I make as I travel now through the world, and especially now at this time reaching 56, going into more of the crone side of life, understanding deeply the wisdom that I carry in my womb that will hopefully connect all women to their own wisdom. And that's what Dance of the Womb is all about, connecting women into the womb wisdom, rising above my story, rising above my story, not being hostage to that story anymore, but realizing the gift that my story gave me and sharing the gift of my story with all women all over the world for birth, for life, for mothering, to pass on to our children. And so each one of the chapters of the book has all of the different dance chapters and the chapters of my story of my life. So you can see how I came to Australia as a baby, as I grew up in Australia, as I went back to the Middle East when I was 21, when I had an arranged marriage with one of my first cousins as well, when I became pregnant with my first son and the story of that, and the reconnection to my roots and the barrenness of the mother within me and how that felt, because birth is an emotional journey. It's an energetic journey. It binds us to all the women who've come before us, and we need to understand that if we're working in the birthing world. It's not just one woman coming to give birth to her baby. It is all women coming to give birth to all babies, in fact, to humanity. And that is the feeling of Dance of the Womb, is that deep, deep, soulful connection to all of humanity that I wanted to share. And the other side of it as well is being a baby that was taken from their mother. I am that baby that was taken from her mother. And I've worked very, very, very hard over the last 22 years to keep mothers and babies together. To keep mothers and babies together, and why this is so important on an emotional, spiritual, and energetic level. You know, stop taking mothers and babies away from each other. We need to think about that baby, the experience of the baby with its mother and the mother with its baby. And that is also why I wrote Dance of the Womb, to have that understanding of why that is so important and how that affects humanity and the consciousness of love on our planet, and how we can keep raising the consciousness of love through the way we birth, through the understanding of that universal dance of the womb. And just wanted to also tell you why I wrote the book, which is a funny story. When my boys were 1 and 4, the father of my boys and myself, my boys were 1 and 4, we went around the world for 4 months. And the last place we went to, after we'd been to we'd been to Greece, we'd been to Lebanon, we'd been to England visiting family, and I did get to introduce my boys to my mum, which was so beautiful. But I was sitting on a beach in Samoa, and Tariq, my youngest, was 1, and he was picking bananas off the palm trees in Samoa, and Kailash was on the beach in Samoa, and I was sitting just on the beach, relaxed, and a woman from Europe was sitting next to me. She was a traveller in Samoa as well, and she said to me, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I've been a childbirth educator at that time. I'd been probably 10 years teaching embodied birth and belly dance birth." And I told her all about my roots and about my story, being disconnected from my Middle Eastern roots, and how birth brought me back to the understanding of where I come from and that ancient lineage, and how the belly dance birth movements connect us to our womb wisdom, to our sense of belonging, our sense of attachment, our babies, the greater story of woman. And she thought it was absolutely wonderful. And she said to me, "You need to write a book." She said, "All women need this information." And I thought to myself, because I'd always been a writer, actually, that was my forte in writing. And I thought, yeah, she's right. I need to write a book. And she said, "No, you need to spread your message around the world. All women need to hear about this." And this is, in 2000. So we're talking 17 years ago, when the first idea was seeded about me teaching and writing my book. And I thought, she's right. I need to write a book. And I need to, as a cathartic exercise as well, to share my story and to share with all women the beauty of belly dance birth, the beauty of coming home to your instincts, the beauty of being the custodian of birth, the beauty of leaving women to find that song and dance that is within, that the belly dance birth really brings you to. So I started when I got back from that round the world trip. I had my son on the breast. He was 15 months of age. and I just started writing my book. And, you know, one hand, it was sort of like this, breastfeeding him, and with one hand typing my story and scribing in books as we used to do, you know, getting it all down. And it was amazing. It just all poured out of me. This book, Dance of the Womb, just poured out of me. It was just sitting in there, being held in the depths of my womb, in the caverns of my womb, sharing the story of my story of life and birth of my children. And so that's how Dance of the Womb came about. And I'm very grateful to the inspiration of the woman in Samoa who encouraged me to write this story. And I'm always feel very blessed that I met her and that I was able to write this. And then I self-published the book myself. And I got my endorsements from Dr. Michel Odent and Sheila Kitzinger. And I love Sheila Kitzinger's, you know, her amazing work. And she really understood about bringing birth back home to mothers, babies, our wombs, our hearts, our hands, the ancient lineage. She loved all the different cultural roots around birthing. And she really encouraged me with the Belly Dance Birth. And I was very proud to be put in her book, Birth and Sex, which is also another incredible book. So yeah, I was very blessed and honoured to have her endorsement. And Dr. Michel Odent, of course, who understands the primal brain is the brain that gives birth, and that when we allow women, or we shouldn't allow, but when women can come into that primal birthing place and birth their babies, and that is what the dance of the belly dance movements do. They bring you into your self-referenced autonomy, into the primal brain that knows how to give birth. And I often say, you just stop distracting women from coming into that place. And the movements will bring you into your body awareness as a somatic sacred practice. All women know these instinctive, intuitive movements of the belly dance birth. So that was the story of how I wrote Dance of the Womb. If you want, we're also giving away a couple of free chapters as well. And as I mentioned before, it is an ebook and also a hard copy book, excuse me. So that's what I wanted to share today. And in the next 6 days, I will be reading from each chapter of the circle, the figure 8, the spiral, the chest, the hands and arms, and the cervix of the dance movements. So tune in with me, 11 o'clock on Australian Eastern Standard Time from tomorrow, Tuesday, till Sunday, 11 o'clock, and I will share with you from my book. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background about me and about my book and about, you know, who I am as well. And to remember that the way I came to becoming a childbirth educator was from my wonderful experiences of birthing naturally, birthing as nature intended, physiologically. And, you know, I have to say I am so grateful for having been in Byron Bay, Australia, which was the home birth capital of Australia, the indigenous birthing place of the Aboriginal women that inspired in me the roots of birthing, inspired me to become confident to share my roots as well. Yeah. And that's the thing about birth, is we need to inspire each other. We need to uphold the sacredness of birth that we know to be true. And we have to stop getting distracted by the system or the hierarchy or whatever you want to call it that wants to disassociate us from what our heart's knowing is, that blueprint, that map of birth that all women know. And that's the place that I teach belly dance birth and embody birth from. And that's the place that I've written my book, Dance of the Womb. I wish that Dance of the Womb was available to all childbirth educators, doula courses, midwifery courses, you know, all of that would be so wonderful to see my book as part of the curriculum, because we don't just need medical books, we need books about the true emotional aspects of birth, about the heart, the womb, the mother's story. So I'd love that if anyone is interested, if anyone's interested to translate this book into other languages as well, so it can become available to more women. So thanks everybody for listening, and don't forget tomorrow we'll be starting with the first reading from the chapter, The Circle Movement, of Dance of the Womb, my award-winning world first book. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a beautiful day and lots of love. See you tomorrow. Bye.